Hello everyone. I am the storyteller. Tonight, I'll tell you a story that moves like dark water under ice, slow, silent, and always pulling. It's been passed down in scraps of rumor, scratched into guardroom walls, and muttered by men who never went back for a second season. Most folks will tell you it's just damn talkshift worker superstition to keep rookies jumpy on the night watch. But I know better. Because I worked there. It began in the dead of winter, at Ross Gorge Dam, where the river cuts deeper than the light can follow. There, night doesn't foul, it presses in. And when the turbines go still, and the spillway window turns black as a pupil, something comes to measure you. No one calls it by name. We just follow the rules. So take a seat. Hear the hum of the generators under your feet. Keep your eyes off the water. And whatever you dowhen, you feel the weight shift in your chest and look at the window. After my divorce and the foreclosure on the house, I was living in my truck in late November. Not even in a warm state, either. This was northern Washington, where the cold stings you awake every hour and the damp crawls into your bones. I'd been picking up part-time handyman work, but the jobs dried up once the weather turned. My checking account was down to double digits. Then I saw the posting. Night security, Ross River Hydro Facility. $48 per hour starting pay, benefits, housing provided. No prior experience necessary. Apply in person or call to arrange immediate interview. It looked fake. Or a scam. Nobody pays that for a watchman job. Still I called. The voice on the other end was warm but clipped. Female, mid-50s maybe. She asked me 3 questions. 1. Can you start tonight? 2. Can you follow written instructions to the letter? 3. Do you have any medical conditions that prevent you from standing for extended periods? When I said yes to the first 2 and no to the third, she said, report to the Ross River Dam service gate by 7 p.m. Ask for Captain Hensley. Bring warm clothes. You'll be given the guidelines. She didn't call them rules. She called them guidelines. That should have been my first warning. The facility is 35 miles from the nearest town. The last 15 miles are gravel switchbacks up through dark pine forest, with sheer drop-offs into the frozen river gorge below. No street lights. My cell signal died somewhere around mile 7. At the top, the forest just stops. The dam stretches out like a concrete wall from another era, the Ross River pooled black and motionless behind it, the spillway roaring white below. A cluster of low buildings sits on the near side, all sodium lamp yellow and shadowed. Captain Hensley was waiting outside the security office, cigarette smoke curling in the beam of the yard light. Stocky guy, late 60s, shaved head. No handshake, just handed me a thick manila envelope. Guidelines, he said. Read them before you clock in. Everyone. Don't improvise. The way he said that last part made my stomach knot. There were 8, printed in bold 14-point type, each on its own page. I'll give them to you exactly as written, because that's important. 1. Always begin your patrol at midnight sharp. No earlier, no later. 2. Never look directly into the spillway between 2:10 and 2:25. 3. If you hear 3 knocks on the control room door after 1 o'clock, do not answer. 4. Do not cross the painted yellow line on the turbine floor under any circumstances. 5. If the river appears completely still, immediately proceed to the chapel room in the basement and wait until the siren sounds. 6. Do not speak to anyone wearing an orange raincoat. There are no employees with orange raincoats. 7. If the weighing scale in the guardroom reads less than your weight by more than 21 grams, you must leave the dam within 60 seconds and wait until dawn before re-entering. 8. The guidelines supersede all other orders. I laughed under my breath at a couple of them. Orange raincoat. 21 grams. But Hensley's face didn't change. You follow these, you'll be fine, he said. Break, you won't. The shift was quiet at first. Just me, my flashlight, the hiss of the spillway. Inside, the turbines throbbed like a giant heartbeat through the floor. The place smells like oil, wet concrete, and old copper wiring. At exactly midnight, I started the patrol down the main corridor, past the control room, then outside across the dam walkway. My breath steamed in the air, the black river on one side, a drop into foaming whitewater on the other. I caught myself looking into the spillway. It's hypnotic, but checked my watch. 0:17, safe. At 1:13, I was in the control room checking the log when I heard it, 3 slow knocks on the door. Not pounding, polite. Hollow, like from inside the steel. The security monitors showed nothing. Nobody in the hallway. I froze, remembering Rule 3. The knocks came again, softer this time. Then a voice. Weight must be balanced. Weight must be true. I backed away from the door, pulse hammering. The voice didn't try again. When I checked the guardroom scale 10 minutes later, it read 181. I weighed 202. That was my first night. And it's why I'm writing this all down, because if you ever get offered a job at Ross River, you need to know what's really here, and who waits beneath the still water. I didn't sleep much that day. The security office has a cot in a back room, but every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice again. Weight must be balanced. Weight must be true. By the time I woke, Hensley was already gone. The only other day shift guy I saw was a wiry tech named Joe, who looked at me like he was checking for damage. "How'd your first night go?" he asked. "Fine," I lied. He nodded, but his eyes didn't believe me. "Followed the guidelines?" "Every one." "Good." He hesitated. "Don't weigh yourself unless you have to." That sentence didn't leave my head for the rest of the day. By midnight, I was back on patrol. I'd convinced myself the knocks from the night before were some prank from another shift. Halfway through, I ducked into the guardroom for coffee. Out of habit, I stepped onto the scale. It read 178. I stepped off. Back on. Same number. That was 24 grams short by the rule's logic. Rule 7 said leave the dam within 60 seconds and wait until dawn. I stared at the wall clock. 1:42. If I left, I'd have to cross the dam walkway in the freezing dark. But I wasn't about to find out what happened if I stayed. I grabbed my coat and went for the exit. Outside, the wind cut like knives. The spillway's roar was deafening until it wasn't. One moment the water thundered over the concrete, the next, it was silent. I glanced down and froze. The river was still. Completely, perfectly flat, as though frozen in glass. Even the foam was motionless. Rule 5, if the river appears completely still, immediately proceed to the chapel room in the basement and wait until the siren sounds. The chapel room was the opposite direction from the exit. Which rule do you break? The one that told you to get out in 60 seconds, or the one that told you to hide in the basement? The air felt wrong, heavy, like the atmosphere before a storm. I turned back, running for the basement. My flashlight beam caught dust motes drifting in the stairwell, each falling too slowly, like the air was thick. The chapel wasn't much. Concrete walls, a small altar with a tarnished bronze scale bolted to it, one pan slightly lower than the other. Rows of metal folding chairs. I sat. The stillness pressed against my ears until I thought I'd go deaf from it. Then, faintly, a sound, not the siren. A dragging scrape on the floor behind the altar. It wasn't a full sighting, not yet. But I saw the shape of it through the gap beneath the altar table. Thick, clawed fingers, dark as wet stone. Something heavy shifting its weight. The claws flexed once, and I caught a glimpse of hide patterned, almost scaled, but with coarse fur between the plates. Then the siren blared, and the sound was gone. When I looked again, there was nothing behind the altar. When daylight came, I found Joe in the mess hall. "What's the chapel room for?" I asked. He froze mid-chew. "Don't go in there unless the river's still." "I did last night." His fork clinked against the plate. "You saw her, then?" "Her?" Joe glanced around, lowered his voice. "Amit. The devourer. Crocodile head, lion body, hippo back. Eats you if your heart's heavier than the feather." I laughed once short, nervous. "That's Egyptian mythology." "Yeah," Joe said. "So's the thing under the dam." That afternoon, I explored the dam's archive room. Most of the records were engineering logs and maintenance reports, but in the back were old photographs. One showed the construction site in 1913. Before the dam wall was poured, the riverbed was a dry excavation pit. In the middle stood a cluster of black stone blocks, each carved with figures: crocodiles, lions, scales. Workers stood beside them, their faces hard and unsmiling. The caption read, "Excavation of the Burial Platform, Ross Gorge, 1912. That's when I started to realize the guidelines weren't just about the job. They were about keeping whatever was buried here contained. And maybe, just maybe, they weren't enough anymore. By the third night, I thought I was starting to understand the guidelines. Follow the times. Don't talk to things that aren't supposed to be here. Watch the scale. The weather had turned warmer, a light rain soaking the walkway. The spillway thundered as usual, white water thrashing into the gorge below. I was making my outside pass when my radio hissed. "Security 1, this is Control. We've got movement on the south camera." It was Dave on derotation, a voice I didn't know well. "What kind of movement?" I asked. Silence. Then, "Can you check it out?" South camera faced the spillway. I glanced at my watch. 2:11. Rule 2, never look directly into the spillway between 2:10 and 2:25. I told myself I could angle my head, catch whatever was moving without technically looking. I told myself the rule was superstition. So I leaned over the rail. The world went wrong. The water wasn't water anymore. It was black, viscous, and slow, pouring in sheets that never broke into spray. In it, shapes rolled just beneath the surface, something wide-muzzled, with teeth like polished stone, a paw bigger than my torso, a ridged back that broke the surface without making a ripple. The roar of the spillway dropped to a low, thrumming hum, vibrating in my teeth. Then the head came up. It was crocodilian, but the eyes weren't on the sides, they were forward-facing, set in a broad, lion-like skull. Fur matted with slime clung around its jaws, and its teeth didn't match. Some were crocodile fangs, others flat, hippo-like crushing plates. The water sheeted off it in thick ropes as it stared at me. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The scales along its neck shimmered faintly with something gold, symbols I didn't understand, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. And then it opened its mouth. Weight must be balanced. Weight must be true. But this time, I understood something in it, a pull, like the words were hooks behind my ribs. I could feel my pulse slowing, my thoughts thickening. The gold symbols grew brighter. The hum deepened, matching the throb in my skull. Some part of me realized she wasn't just looking at me. She was measuring me. A hand yanked me backward so hard I hit the deck. Hensley was there, pale and shaking, yelling into my face, "Don't look during the window." I was still half in the hum, ears ringing, but he was dragging me toward the control room, cursing under his breath. When we got inside, he shoved me into a chair. "You feel heavy right now?" I nodded, every limb like it weighed double. "Drink water. Keep your eyes on the floor." She only got a partial measure. For the rest of the shift, the spillway sounded wrong, too deep, too slow. I couldn't shake the image of her eyes on me. By dawn, the heaviness faded, but something else stayed, a sense that she'd remembered me. The rules weren't there to keep us from seeing her. They were there to keep her from knowing us. I couldn't stop replaying it. Rule 7 told me to leave immediately if the scale read too light. Rule 5 told me to go to the chapel room if the river was still. The night I first saw her claws, both happened at once, but I survived. 2 rules triggered. 2 rules broken. And I was still here. Joe caught me in the mess hall. "You're pale," he said. "Didn't sleep." "You should." I lowered my voice. "What happens if 2 guidelines contradict?" Joe's eyes flicked toward the security cameras in the corners. "Don't test it." "Why?" "Because it works both ways. Sometimes they cancel out. Sometimes they stack." "Stack." He leaned in, whispering. "That's how Ellis died." Then he left his tray and walked out. It was around 0:40 when I passed the turbine floor. The yellow line gleamed under the industrial lights. Rule 4, do not cross the painted yellow line under any circumstances. And from the control room above, I could see the scale in the guardroom read 179. 2 rules, again. Cross the line, and also way too light. The rational part of me said don't. But another part, the one that had been gnawing at this for days, wanted to see what happened. I stepped over the yellow line. Nothing. The turbines rumbled, the smell of hot oil thick in my throat. My watch ticked toward 0:42. My skin prickled, but not from cold. Then the lights overhead flickered once. The air went heavy, not like weather this time, but like gravity itself had doubled. Somewhere above, the river's sound cut off. I looked toward the far end of the turbine hull. There was a shimmer in the air, a distortion, like heat above asphalt. It spread, widening into a wet, rippling oval that reached from floor to ceiling. Inside it, dark water churned. And moving through that water was her. But this wasn't like the spillway. There was no distance, no barrier. She was stepping through. First the lion forepaws, black claws clicking on steel. Then the crocodile head, jaws opening as the golden sigils burned brighter. The air stank of rot and wet stone. My chest felt crushed, like my ribs were being measured from the inside. This time, the words weren't about weight. They were about place. "You crossed the line. You are in the floodplain now." Her head lowered until her eyes were level with mine. They weren't reptile eyes, or mammal eyes, they were deep, gold-lit pits, and inside each one I saw myself, smaller and smaller, falling away. I don't remember running, just being outside in the cold, doubled over, lungs on fire. The siren was blaring, high and urgent, from somewhere in the dam. Hensley found me an hour later, still shaking, and didn't speak until we were in the office. "You can't do that again," he said. "When you break the wrong 2 rules, she doesn't have to wait for the window. She can walk right in. Why didn't she take me?" He lit a cigarette. "Because she's patient. She's already got your measure." That night, I realized something worse than seeing Amit. She was learning me. 3 days after the double breach, Hensley told me I could take an evening off. "Go to town," he said. "Eat something that didn't come out of a can." I didn't argue. By sunset I was 20 miles down the mountain, parked outside a diner. It felt almost normal, real voices, the smell of fryer oil, the hum of neon. But that was the problem. It felt too normal. I saw him through the diner window as I was paying my check, a tall man in an orange raincoat, hood up, standing under the streetlight across the road. It wasn't raining. Rule 6, do not speak to anyone wearing an orange raincoat. There are no employees with orange raincoats. I told myself it couldn't apply out here. It was a work rule. Right? But when I stepped outside, he was still there. Just standing. And even from across the road, I could see his head tilt slightly, like he was scenting the air. I went to my truck without looking at him. Keys in, engine on. I glanced in the side mirror. He was halfway across the street. Still walking. Still silent. The diner's parking lot light flickered. The air pressed down, not heavy like the turbine hall, but thick, humid, like the river mist in summer. Except it was 38 degrees. When I looked again, he was only a few feet from my window. The hood shadowed most of it, but the mouth was wrong wide, stretching too far back, with the faintest suggestion of teeth that weren't all the same type. And the raincoat? It was wet. Dripping. But the drops didn't fall right, they hung in the air a second too long before hitting the pavement. He leaned closer to the glass. I heard it not with my ears, but inside my head. The measure is incomplete. Return to the floodplain. I didn't drive back to the dam that night. I headed straight for a cheap motel 2 towns over. Left the lights on. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of water dripping in the bathroom. The sink was dry. The shower was dry. The drips were coming from inside the mirror, slow, thick, black drops sliding down the reflection, but not on the glass. And in the warped surface of the silver backing, I could just make out a hooded figure standing behind me. By dawn, the mirror was normal again. No sign of moisture. I called Hensley from the motel payphone. She can reach outside the dam. Not unless you let her, he said flatly. You looked at him, didn't you? Get back here. Tonight. And for God's sake, follow the guidelines until you understand why they exist. That was when I realized the worst part. The guidelines weren't just workplace policy. They were the only thing holding the perimeter. And I had already poked a hole in it. Back at the dam, Joe gave me a long look before I even clocked in. You're different, he said. What's that supposed to mean? Like you've been carrying something heavy. I brushed it off, but in the locker room mirror my face did look off, not older exactly, just tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. My eyes had a duller color, like the shine had gone. And the scale in the guardroom? 177. Rule following became second nature after the raincoat encounter. I kept my eyes away from the spillway during the window, never touched the yellow line, stayed out of the chapel unless I had to. But each night the scale read lighter. 179, 178. Now 177. I wasn't losing weight, my belt still fit, my face wasn't thinner. Whatever she was taking, it wasn't flesh. I went back to the archive, this time looking for anything about the burial platform in that old photo. Buried under 1912 correspondence, I found a packet of typed notes labeled Protocol, Scale and River. Ross Gorge Excavation, W.J. Mason. The pages were a mix of engineering jargon and bizarre instructions, ones I recognized as early versions of the guidelines. One paragraph stopped me cold. Subject's heart mass variance must not exceed 21 grams from baseline, else Amit will regard the subject as judged and devour accordingly. The bronze scale in the chapel room is calibrated to the Mott standard, one pen fixed with ostrich feather weight, the other pen free for weighing the human heart either literally or by proximity. That was when it clicked, the 21 grams in Rule 7 wasn't random. They'd tied the whole system to the Egyptian concept of Mott, truth, balance, cosmic order. The spillway window wasn't about safety. It was her trial period. If she measured you and found you wanting, you were hers. And my weight was slipping. Around 3 p.m., during my off hours, someone knocked on the security office door. Through the glass I saw a young woman in a yellow slicker, hair plastered to her face from rain. She looked lost. I opened the door a crack. Can I help you? She blinked. Is this the way to the Ross River trailhead? Before I could answer, something dripped onto my boot. It was thick and black, like oil. The source wasn't her hair, it was her eyes. They were crying black water. Her voice changed mid-sentence, deeper, layered, not hers. Your heart is heavier than your breath. Soon it will sink. Then she was gone, like actually gone, in the time it took me to blink. Only a wet footprint on the concrete remained. When I told Joe, he muttered, "You're on her list now." What list? The one she's already started eating. It hit me that night. The guidelines don't save you forever. They just slow the process. Once Amit has your measure, it's like a clock starts ticking and the scale's reading is the countdown. The necropolis wasn't on any blueprint. I only found it because of a bad water sensor reading one that kept flagging, flow obstruction, in the turbine intake, then clearing on its own. Maintenance sent me to check the intake gallery at 140. The gallery is narrow, concrete sweating from condensation, and the sound of water pounding through the pipes makes conversation impossible. At the far end, the walkway dead-ended into a metal hatch I'd never noticed. No signage. No lock. It opened with a groan. Behind it was a stone stairway, ancient, not poured concrete, leading down into warm, wet darkness. The air was heavy, smelling of copper and stagnant water. My flashlight beam caught carvings along the walls, hieroglyphs worn smooth but still sharp enough to recognize: scales, feathers, a crocodile head, a lion's paw. The steps ended at an archway. Beyond it was a wide, circular chamber, stone pillars holding up a ceiling lost in shadow. The floor was flooded ankle deep, the water black and still. Along the walls, stone slabs jutted out like shelves. On each slab was a shape covered by rotting linen. I made the mistake of touching one of the wrappings. They came apart in my fingers like wet paper, and beneath was a human body, desiccated but intact. The mouth was open in a scream, and the ribs were shattered from the inside. By the feet was a bronze plate with numbers etched into it, -23G. At the center of the chamber was a raised platform. Upon it sat an enormous bronze scale, the same design as the chapels, but big enough to weigh a person. A tablet leaned against it, and my flashlight beam caught the words in English, carved deep. Rule 0: if the heart's measure is nearly lost, it may be reset by another's gift. Balance is restored by equal weight freely given. I didn't need anyone to explain. If your weight dropped too far, you could take someone else's. The moment I read it, the chamber changed. The water rippled though there was no breeze. The hieroglyphs on the pillars began to faintly glow, and in the shadows above, I saw her head lower from the darkness. Her voice came from everywhere at once. You have walked into the scale's shadow. You may bargain, if you know the cost. My flashlight flickered. The glow of the gold sigils reflected in the water made it look deep enough to drown. I stumbled back through the archway, up the stairs 2 at a time, the sound of water now behind me though the chamber had been still moments before. When I emerged into the intake gallery, I realized my chest felt lighter. Too light. In the guardroom, the scale read 174. I had 2 choices now. Follow the rules and watch the number drop until she came for me. Or use Rule 0. Either way, someone wasn't making it out of this dam. By the next night, the guardroom scale read 172. I didn't feel sick. I didn't feel weak. But there was a strange float in my chest, like my ribs weren't anchored anymore. Joe noticed. She's picking up speed with you. What happens when it hits 0? He didn't answer. Just stared at the floor and muttered, "You won't be the one walking away." On the midnight patrol, I went to check the turbine floor. Normally there's at least 2 maintenance techs walking the line, but the place was empty, lights still on, tools left where they'd been dropped. Later, in the break room, Hensley asked if I'd seen Myers. No. He clocked in but never checked out. Locker's still here. Nobody said it, but everyone thought the same thing, Rule 0. That night I dreamed I was standing at the bronze scale in the necropolis. In one pan was my heart, dark and shrunken, in the other, a feather that looked more like bone than down. Amit's head lowered until her snout nearly touched mine. "Your weight is not gone, only shifted. Take it back. Or take another's." She stepped aside, and behind her I saw Joe, standing still, eyes empty, his chest rising and falling like he was asleep. The free pan tipped toward him. I woke with my pulse racing and did the math in my head. Joe was healthy. I could gain back 20 grams easily from him. It would be enough. The thought didn't horrify me like it should have. The following shift, the scale in the guardroom read 190. For me, it still read 172, but for someone else, it had gone up. And in the mess hall, I realized I hadn't seen Randall in 2 days. His name was still on the roster. That was when I understood other people were using Rule 0. Quietly. Carefully. And nobody talked about it, because the alternative was joining the slabs downstairs. That night, she came again in the spillway window. Her voice didn't give the usual measure. Instead, she whispered. "They are feasting, and you starve. Choose, or be chosen." The water below looked deep enough to fall into forever. By Friday, the guardroom scale read 169 for me. At the current rate, I had maybe 4 nights before the measure hit the limit. And Hensley's eyes said he knew it too. "We've got a turbine fault," he told me. "You and Joe are on intake duty tonight." I caught the hesitation in his voice, like he was assigning a fox to guard the henhouse. Down in the intake gallery, the air was damp and loud with the rush of water. Joe went ahead, checking the grates. His back was turned, flashlight beam bobbing over the pipes. The thought slid into my head so easily it didn't feel like mine. One shove. He falls. Weight transfers. You walk away. My fingers twitched toward his shoulder. A sudden clang echoed from deeper in the gallery, a metal hatch slamming. Joe turned, frowning. "You hear that?" We both turned our lights toward the far end. That's when we saw her, not in the spillway this time, but here, in the gallery, standing ankle-deep in rushing water. The hood was down. Her head was crocodile and lion and something else all at once, teeth like wet bone, eyes the color of deep silt. Joe froze. I couldn't move. Her voice was inside my skull. "2 hearts weigh more than 1. Choose, and the scale tips in your favor." In the corner of my vision, I saw my reflection in the wet metal chest faintly glowing, like light through thin paper. Joe's reflection was solid. Heavy. Joe stepped closer to me, whispering, "Don't look at her." But my legs were moving toward him, toward the edge of the platform. I could hear the rush of the water beneath the grate, black and cold. It would be so easy. Just one motion, and I'd gain 20 grams. I'd live. I didn't shove him. I shoved myself. The water hit like stone, spinning me in total darkness. I thought I heard her scream, but it could have been the turbines. When I woke, I was on the turbine floor, coughing up water, Joe kneeling over me. "You're at 164, he said. "You're almost out of time." The scale in the guardroom read 162. I couldn't ignore the way everyone avoided my eyes now. They'd seen this before, someone circling the drain. Joe left a note on my locker. "If you go under, don't go alone." I didn't know if it was mercy or a warning. That night, I did the one thing I was sure we weren't supposed to do. I went to the spillway before the window. No hooded figure. No black water. Just the roar of the current and the glint of floodlights on the damn face. But I knew she'd come. She'd been measuring me for too long to miss the ending. I took the staircase down into the intake gallery and opened the unmarked hatch. The stone stairs were slick, but I didn't slow down. The necropolis was exactly as before, slabs, linen-wrapped shapes, still black water. At the center, the bronze scale waited. Her voice rose from the water itself. Your measure is almost gone. You have no gift to give. I stepped onto the platform and put both hands on the scale. What if I give you something heavier than my heart? There was a pause and almost human hesitation. Show me. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the laminated copy of the guidelines. The thing every guard here clung to, the thing that kept the system running. If you take me, fine. But I burn this first. No more rules. No more slow bleeding. Everyone knows, everyone chooses for themselves. For the first time, she stepped fully into the light all crocodile jaw, lion's mane, and the heavy, thick body of a river beast. Her gaze was a pressure, like deep water. The scale pan under my feet rose, slow as the tide. The other pan lowered, the feather trembling. Then her mouth split in something between a snarl and a smile. Balance restored but not for you. I woke on the turbine floor again, lungs burning. Joe was gone. So was the note on my locker. The guardroom scale read 181. But it wasn't my weight. I could feel it heavy in my chest, but not mine. And in the chapel, the bronze scale's feather was gone. From then on, the spillway window stayed empty for me. But sometimes, I'd see her in the corner of my eye, watching someone else. Waiting for their number to drop.